Now, the Belgian king, Philippe, is visiting DR Congo with his wife, Queen Mathilde. King Philippe has decried the racism meted out in the Democratic Republic of Congo under the colonial rule of his ancestors. It says the regime was one of unequal relations, unjustifiable in itself, marked by paternalism, discrimination, and racism. King Philippe is on a week-long visit to DR Congo at the invitation of President Félix Tshisekedi. While speaking in DR Congo's parliament in Kinshasa, the Belgian king tendered his apology to the people of the nation for the wounds of the past. Belgium's colonial record in DR Congo was one of the bloodiest in Africa. Now, Collins Weke is a global affairs analyst and he joins me from Belgium for more insight into the latest development. Thank you very kindly for joining us, Collins. Belgium's King Philippe reaffirmed his deepest regret for his nation's colonial era abuses in the DRC. But why do you think he refused to formally apologize?
Well, thank you, Ibrahim, for having me. I believe that expression of deep regrets and tendering of apology are two, technically different issues. And each one of them has its impact, but it also has its effect. Now, tendering of deep regret, as King Philip has done, essentially, says what it means what it says, which is, yes, they regret the past. Now, stopping short of that and not, tendering a full-fledged apology is probably for, political and financial consideration, because once an apology is tendered, it then opens a floodgate of, requests for restitution, compensation, and all of that. And considering the extent at which atrocities were committed in, Democratic Republic of Congo by Belgium, the question then is, where does it begin and where does it end? And indeed, there are people who are actually asking the question, financial compensation, to what extent does it help to build the future, leave the nostalgia behind, and chart a new course? So those are the technicalities around it.
Well, by some estimates, killings, famine, and disease killed up to 10 million Congolese during the 23 years of Belgium's rule from 1885 to 1960. That's when King Leopold II ruled the Congo Free State as a personal fiefdom. Talk to us about the impact of colonialism on the African nations, and can these wounds ever heal? Well,
the wound healing is, dependent on, what the future brings. Essentially, you can forgive, but forgetting what has happened is a different kettle of fish. So the atrocities were humongous. The figure that you mentioned, which is 10 million Congolese who perished under the authoritarian rule of King Leopold II, is huge. Just to give you a sense of what we're talking about here, Ibrahim, the population of the entire Belgium is between 10 and 11 million people. So essentially what it means is that in the period under review, Belgium, under the King Leopold at the time, killed the number of people, the same population that habitate in Belgium as of now. Now, I think one of the reasons that it continues to resonate, it continues to sing, very, very bitter song out here, is that the traces of the racism, the atrocities that happened then, are still present in present-day Belgium in terms of how the African diaspora are treated. Now, don't get me wrong, I mean, I live and work here. This has become my adopted home, and I have received, opportunities and chances here that I probably wouldn't get in my country of birth.
At least you were not torn apart, or you were not snatched from your parents to
Absolutely.
Belgium.
But I am actually yes, you are absolutely right. But I'm actually talking about the persistence of racism that then remains a reminder of those atrocities of the past, but also saying that some improvements have been made, some achievements in terms of doing away with discrimination and racism, but a whole lot of work still needs to be done. And I believe that once more is done to wipe away racism and discrimination, I think the wounds of the past will be a bit a bit easier to begin to heal.
Well, the Belgian king, Philippe, said, and I quote, even though many Belgians invested themselves sincerely, loving Congo and its people deeply, the colonial regime itself was based on exploitation and domination. So the question is, how can you claim you love someone, but your presence in their house is for exploitation? Isn't that ironic?
It is ironic, and as a matter of fact, King Philip did his best. He did his level best, actually, to represent the atrocities of the past in very clear language, which is a very huge improvement from the language spoken by his uncle, King Baldwin, in 1960, I believe in June 1960, when Congo became independent from Belgium. So he referred to those atrocities, are just things that merely happened. So you see, incrementally, the language, is being gotten right, but they are simply not there yet. I believe it's a learning curve for them, and in the new partnership that they want to form, the two countries are serious to forming a new partnership, going forward. One can only hope that when King Philip said that the paternalism that actually modeled the relationship in the colonial time will actually give way to a partnership of equal, where it is understood that Congo is not just there, to receive arms and aids from, Belgium, but that they have quite a lot to offer. As a matter of fact, this country, Belgium, was built on the sweat and blood of Congo. In the city where, I reside, for example, Ostend, all the monuments and all of that were built by, Congolese slaves.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
It is a long path to walk.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's actually a convenient place for us to leave it, because we look at the DRC, with the common challenges that they are faced with, and some other African nations, looking at how they can build the ties again with the relationship that soured during the Joseph Kabila's era. But then we just have to leave it here. Global Affairs Analyst Colin Zweke, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, Graham.